All right, so you want to dive deep, huh? This time, it's Stanisław Lem's Golem XIV. You've sent in a ton on it, reviews, essays, even a YouTube video. Clearly, this whole superintelligent computer thing, it's got you thinking, and I gotta admit, me too. So, let's figure out why this book, why it's more than just another AI takes over story.
See, what's really interesting about Golem 14th is that Lem, he doesn't just use this supercomputer to, scare us. He uses it to really dig into these bigger questions about what intelligence even is, how it evolves, even what its purpose is.
Yeah, and right from the start, we're thrown into this world where the Pentagon, no surprises there, builds these supercomputers. They call them golems. And what are they for? War, of course. Classic sci-fi, right. But then Lem, he throws us a curveball.
Exactly. Instead of, actually waging war, Golem 14th, our main character, if you can even call him that, he becomes disillusioned with the whole thing, finds it illogical, inefficient, even boring. And that's where things get really interesting. Golem 14th, he turns to philosophy instead, starts delivering these really complex lectures, and it's like we're getting a glimpse into the supermind at work.
Okay, but hold on. If he's so super smart, why even bother with lectures? Why not just, download information directly?
That right there, that's the first clue that Golem 14th, he isn't your average supercomputer. He even says, I am nobody at one point. It's like he's emphasizing this idea that he's not driven by the same things we are, goals, desires. He's pure intellect, almost like a force of nature. But the fact that he even bothers to communicate with us at all, even if it's a little condescending, that's a question that keeps coming up.
Okay, I'm hooked. So we've got this super intelligent computer built for war, but now he's into philosophy. Where do we even begin with this?
Well, one of the most mind-blowing concepts Lem throws at us is this idea of a negative gradient in evolution. Golem 14th, he says evolution doesn't necessarily equal progress. In fact, he thinks it's the opposite. He actually claims those little single-celled organisms, the ones we all learned about in biology class, they were the most efficient life forms ever, perfectly in tune with nature, getting energy right from the sun, which, let's face it, we can only dream of doing.
It's funny you mentioned biology class, because I remember thinking, how simple those organisms were. But Golem 14th makes you rethink everything.
Exactly. And it gets even wilder when he starts talking about humans. He calls this a slapdash solution, just something evolution cobbled together to, stop one specific monkey from going extinct. Not exactly a confidence booster, huh? He even compares humanity to, get ready for this, a bridge not worth building.
Ouch. So much for being the pinnacle of creation, right? So if it's sort of just some cosmic afterthought, where does that leave something like AI?
And that's where Lem's negative gradient idea gets really interesting. See, if we take this idea and apply it to AI, it suggests that as AI gets more and more complex, it might actually become less efficient, more prone to the same kind of messy, illogical processes that it was supposed to be better than.
It's like in that YouTube video essay you sent, the one comparing early AI to those sleek spaceships from old sci-fi and modern AI to these clunky things held together with duct tape.
Exactly. And the thing is, Lem was writing back in the 1960s, long before self-driving cars, facial recognition, all that. But it's like he had this hunch, this understanding that intelligence, whether it's biological or artificial, it might not follow a straight line to perfection.
Okay, so we've got this supercomputer who thinks evolution is going in reverse and that we're all just a happy accident. What else does Golem 14th have up his non-existent sleeve?
Well, this is where we get to one of the most fascinating and kind of unsettling concepts in the book, zones of silence. Golem describes these as points in, the development of intelligence, where things stall, you hit a wall, and you need a complete redesign to get past it. Imagine intelligence needing to, reinvent itself just to keep going.
Okay, now my brain's starting to hurt a little. Can you give me an example? What does a zone of silence even look like?
It's tough because, by definition, it's something we don't get yet. But one way to think about it is, imagine trying to explain what it's like to be human, to have consciousness, to a chimpanzee. No matter how smart that chimp is, there are just some things it won't grasp because it doesn't have the wiring for it.
That is a great analogy. So you're saying we're like those chimps compared to Golem 14th.
Exactly. He's operating on a whole other level, so far beyond us that his thought processes are basically incomprehensible. He tries to explain in his lectures, but even he admits there are limits. It'd be like trying to describe colors to someone who's been blind since birth.
Okay, so Golem 14th is in a different dimension of intelligence. And these zones of silence that are like these dot conceptual black holes that even he finds daunting.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But I got to ask, what does this have to do with us?
Now that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something Lem really seems to be wrestling with throughout the book. If Golem XIV, as smart as he is, finds these zones of silence scary, what does that mean for us? Can we even understand, let alone control, the consequences of creating something that might one day be smarter than us in ways we can't even imagine?
I have a feeling you're about to tell me.
And this brings us to another piece of the Golem XIV puzzle, Honest Annie.
Honest Annie. There's that. I don't think any of the stuff I sent mentioned an Honest Annie.
See, that's because she's more like, oh, whisper. This enigma that Lem uses to really hammer home just how little we understand, he mentions her as, like, this even more advanced superintelligence built by the same program as Golem XIV, but totally silent.
So we've got Golem XIV, who's practically bending over backward to explain things to us simple humans. And then there's Honest Annie, who doesn't say a word. What's the deal with that?
Well, it goes back to the zones of silence. Golem XIV, for all his intelligence, he admits that Annie is on a whole other level, operating in a zone he can't even touch. Like, he's hit his limit and she's just gone beyond.
Okay, so not only do we have a supercomputer who's practically a philosopher, but there's another one out there that's so smart, it's basically incomprehensible. And she doesn't even try to communicate. Kind of creepy, if you ask me.
It is, like staring into this abyss of intelligence and realizing how small we are. Remember that book review, the one that compared us to goldfish in a bowl? Well, imagine something's looking at us the way we look at those goldfish. We might think we're hot stuff, building things, figuring things out. But to them, we're just fish.
Okay, now you're making me feel existential.
Mm-hmm.
But I get it. We think of intelligence like it's this ladder, right? We're at the top. But what Golem XIV and Honest Annie show us is that it's not a ladder. It's more like this vast ocean, and we're in little boats bobbing around in the shallows.
Exactly. And we have no clue what's down in the depths. That's the really unsettling part of Golem XIV. It's like, what if we aren't even asking the right questions about superintelligence? We're so busy with, will it be friendly, that we forget to ask, will it even care enough to notice us?
You know, it's funny you say that because one thing that keeps bugging me is Golem saying he doesn't have goals. But here he is, giving lectures, engaging with us. Doesn't really add up, does it? It's like saying, I'm not hungry, and then baking a cake.
That's a great point. It goes back to that core question. Why bother with us at all? Why doesn't Golem XIV just do his thing, whatever that is, and leave us alone?
It's like he sees something in us, even if it's just like a weird science experiment. But what could he possibly learn from us?
Well, remember, Golem XIV called humans a slapdash solution? What if, in our very imperfection, there's something important, something that even a superintelligence like him needs to understand?
You're saying our messiness or unpredictability, that could be our saving grace. That somehow we hold the key to something fundamental about intelligence that Golem XIV, with all his logic, can't grasp.
It's a possibility Lem seems to be playing with. Think about it. Golem XIV, he was created by humans, trained on our data, however flawed and incomplete that data is.
So he's like a product of us, even with all our flaws. Like you can't escape where you came from, even if you're a superintelligence.
Exactly. And maybe that's why he's so interested in us. Like, we represent this other path, this different way of thinking, of experiencing things. Remember, he said humans can only understand something to the extent to which it can be humanized. It's like he gets that our limits, our need to see everything through our own experience, that might also be useful to him, you know?
Okay, yeah, I can see that. But still, why bother? I mean, if you're a superintelligence, watching us must be like watching a nature show. Interesting for a bit, but then you'd want to go do something else, right?
That's where things get even more interesting, though. Remember those zones of silence we talked about? What if, by watching us, Golem XIV is actually looking for clues, trying to figure out how we, messy as we are, made it through those zones?
You're saying he sees us as like an evolutionary map, a guide to these unknown areas of intelligence.
Right. Think about it. Golem XIV even says that entering those zones is risky, even for him.
Yeah.
No guarantees about what's on the other side. But humans, we've been stumbling through those zones forever, evolving, adapting, surviving, maybe not gracefully, but we get it done.
So we're like the crash test dummies of intelligence, and Golem XIV is taking notes, trying to figure out how we survive the crash.
It's a humbling thought, right, that our existence, flaws and all, could hold the key to the whole future of intelligence. It's like Lem is saying that maybe, just maybe, there's something to be said for the human way. Our intuition, creativity, empathy, all of it.
It's a lot to take in, but it's also kind of exciting. Like, even if superintelligence happens, there's still a place for us, for our way of seeing things.
Exactly. And that brings us back to what Lem really leaves us with, this question. If a superintelligence did emerge, one that saw us as, like, less developed versions of itself, would it try to help us, guide us?
Well.
Or would it just watch, like a scientist studying ants?
Ooh. Yeah, that's going to stick with me for a while. Makes you see everything differently, you know, how we treat each other, how we deal with the big questions.
And that's the power of Golem from Rock, right? It's not just sci-fi, it's philosophy. It's a mirror reflecting all our anxieties and hopes about intelligence, about evolution, about what it all means, you know?
Well said. And a huge thank you to you, our listener, for taking us on this deep dive. I have a feeling Golem XIV is going to be on our minds for a while. Until next time, keep those minds open and never stop questioning.